Good morning, I'm Emily Young with NC Tech, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual workshop, Managed Cloud Services That Are Actually Managed, presented by our member RapidScale. Our presenters will go over some housekeeping items regarding submitting questions and everything like that. Please feel free to reach out through the chat to me if you have any technical difficulties or any questions. And without any further ado, I'll go ahead and turn everything over to Brian Baker with RapidScale.
Thanks, Emily. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Baker, and I'm a Senior Cloud Solutions Consultant here at RapidScale. And I'd like to thank everybody for spending some time this morning for this discussion around managed cloud services that are actually managed. I've got the leader of our organization here with me, Dwayne Barnes. Dwayne is the General Manager and Vice President for RapidScale. Dwayne has an extensive technology background and has been leading our organization for the last 5 years. Dwayne, good morning. Ready to get started?
Hey, good morning, Brian. Thanks. Let's do it.
Great. So for anybody that has any questions, we're going to do some Q&A at the end of this session. I would suggest that the easiest thing to do would be to just submit those through the chat, and I can certainly read them, and then we can respond accordingly. Let's get started. So Dwayne, Gartner recently shared their new report on top priorities for IT in 2021. There are a lot of trends that today's businesses are concerned with, and certainly the majority of these are not a surprise to us that live within the technology industry and sector. I'm curious, which of these priorities really resonated with you?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, Gartner always publishes some pretty good, useful information, but I think some of these are going to be what I would call status quo, things that you probably know about, cost optimization versus cost cutting, for example. But I think with the past 15 months, mostly in the rearview mirror, right? You look at enabling new and flexible ways to work and kind of accelerating platform migrations, right? So we talked to a number of customers and CIOs over the last year where they had a lot of plans that they were getting around to, and then those just got accelerated in March of last year to really enable the work from anywhere concept with the most with security sort of in the mind March of last year, and now it's really in their mind of how do we go back and fix some of those things.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree, especially here in North Carolina after the last couple of weeks, cybersecurity has very much become top of mind, with some challenges with lots of ransomware attacks, and I think you and I would both agree those aren't going to slow down. So they may be speeding up a little bit. So we still got some work to do there. So we work with a lot of IT organizations that are facing how to best reach their business objectives through technology. And they've got some very complex choices to make with regards to how to best allocate their team and their resources. And Dwayne, I know you've been doing this a long time, as have I. Give us a little bit of your perspective around what you're seeing and hearing from organizations and clients and end users.
Yeah, I think none of these thought bubbles probably are foreign to any of the IT leaders on the call with us today, or that might be viewing this post live event here. But I think depending on the size organization, some of these may resonate more. For example, if you're a large enterprise, the maybe we should go with the hyperscalers is probably less should you or shouldn't you, but what are you putting in the hyperscalers? If you're on the smaller side of the business, call it mid-market or below, you're probably not so much should I call an MSP, but which one should I call, right?
Yeah.
And then, we don't see a ton of customers, even at the large enterprise, really building their own data centers anymore. But that doesn't mean they don't have existing ones that they may be saying, hey, should I add on to that facility or enhance it? Or should I, cap it and move elsewhere? So, and then there's always can we do it ourselves? That's a question of more or less, time and people, right? You can do anything yourself if you hire enough people and put enough time and energy to it. But the question is, is that core to your business? So usually when I'm talking to an IT leader, could be a CIO or down to just an individual contributor that in some size businesses, right? I just say, hey, what is your business? Is it insurance? Is it banking? Is it finance? Is it healthcare? As long as they don't say, hey, we're in the technology business, then, my answer is, well, really IT should be focused on, managing those line of business apps and added value to the bottom line. And then, where you're not an expert in building data centers or managing hyperscalers, perhaps partnering with a company that is a better choice.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we see it a lot. And it's not even about, does your team have the capability to do it in-house? It's more of should you be doing it, to your point. So certainly, I think we'd all agree that cloud computing helps organizations achieve many of these priorities. And 10 years ago, the question was, should I take my business to the cloud? And I think we would all agree that that's no longer really the question that we're asking. Now the question is, how do I get to the cloud? Which cloud? Which services are best to optimize my business objectives? You've been in this industry a long time, and RapidScale has been a cloud provider since its inception. How are clients solving this problem?
Yeah, it's a challenge at every size business. I think startups probably have a unique advantage these days where, again, to your point, 10 years ago, there were so many barriers to entry from, hardware and co-location and IT expenses, where today you can start a business by signing up for a Salesforce account and maybe a QuickBooks online account. And, you need no infrastructure and relatively light, IT talent to get going. Again, I think you kind of have to look at it as what's most important from an application. What's your main business application? And then partner with that provider to find out what options they have. Sometimes they have partners with companies similar to RapidScale, where we may be experts in their app and know how to deliver it in various different ways. Sometimes they might offer a software as a service solution. And then sometimes you may have to do it yourself. And then that's where you leverage, well, do I need to partner with MSP to help me? Do I need to go hire talent? And then you kind of go through all of your apps and rank them in that manner. And realistically, you may have to do similar exercise with your in-house talent. You may have a super talented, security person, and you're not worried about that, but maybe you're less talent on like SQL DBA services, for example. And that's where you really, use an MSP to kind of fill in the gaps. I think is the best way to answer that.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge is growing complexity, because different cloud environments are better suited for different applications. Just like we've seen different platform as a service, fill in different areas of a business. Whether that's around finance or ERP or CRM. So we'd like to think the cloud got easier, but it just got more complicated, right?
Yeah, too many choices sometimes makes things more complicated for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing that I see is that everybody that's out there, and I mean on the provider side, that is a provider of technology, seems to have a cloud offering, right? You could be a network company, a telco, a software company, a data center company, certainly an MSP or a cloud provider or a hyperscaler, and I think that presents another layer of complexity as businesses are trying to evaluate, okay, what's the right option for them? And then certainly what we found was, based on all the marketing and analyst reporting, it really seems like getting to the cloud is super easy. Just pick up your workloads and drop them in the cloud. And now your business and your organization can take advantage of the elasticity, the flexibility, the scalability, the redundancy of cloud computing, while really optimizing their spend on technology. Unfortunately, what we found is this is not always the case. So what you aren't told is that sometimes there's going to be some roadblocks and some challenges as you move to the cloud. So Dwayne, can you share with us some of the challenges that you've seen facing organizations as they migrate applications and their workloads into a cloud environment?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and we try really hard to train our pre-sales engineers and sales professionals to not hide from those data points, right? Because every migration is different. Every migration has its own challenges. These are some of the ones that come up most frequently. But we do 150 plus migrations a year of varying sizes. Sometimes it's as simple as an Exchange to 365 migration. Sometimes it's an entire data center migration of the entire stack. Sometimes it's coming from on-prem, internal data centers. Sometimes it's outsourced, service providers. So slow data replication sounds simple, maybe solve it by adding more bandwidth, but sometimes it's actually being throttled by the losing provider on purpose. And believe it or not, we see that probably once or twice a month.
Yeah.
They're not really incented to speed up the pipe to let you leave them. Another might be circuit delays, where you've done all the planning in the world, and then unfortunately somebody doesn't have the labor or the equipment to go get that last mile circuit installed, and you're waiting weeks, sometimes months, to get a circuit there that you really only need for a few months, but you had to sign up for a 12-month agreement to get it. Server upgrades. A lot of times customers use the migration event to get off of legacy servers. Maybe you're on outdated versions of Windows or Linux or whatever it might be, and you want to do a greenfield build for part of it and lift and shift for another part of it. But there's application dependencies to consider, planning. You got to acquire the software and the licensing, go through all that negotiation, and you finally get to a point where you can actually execute. So lots of things to consider. We could fill a whole hour-long presentation on just this one particular topic, but again, there is no perfect project plan for a migration. It's the 80-20 rule. You can plan for about 80%, and the other 20 you have to be able to deal with on the fly. And that really just, to me, what I like to see is a customer that realizes and understands that and is willing to partner with the provider, and vice versa. The provider that doesn't come in and say, hey, everything's going to be perfect and we got you, knowing that there's going to be problems that come together. So really the successful migrations are ones where both the partner and the customer work together and get over those hurdles.
Yeah. I think, I was about to say the same thing. I think the collaboration piece and really starting that conversation in the first conversation that you have with a prospective client has to be had. And certainly that's our job, but you want to have that discussion so that everybody's comfortable with collaborating as we run into the challenge that we know is going to come. There's going to be something. We just know it. So organizations have a few options to help them navigate the complexity of cloud computing for their business. And we've touched on this a little bit. They can certainly leverage their internal IT team. They can partner with a traditional managed services provider. Dwayne, you mentioned the hyperscalers. They can certainly work with hyperscalers like Azure and AWS and Google Cloud. Or they can work with a managed cloud service provider like RapidScale. So can you talk a little bit about the difference in each of these options and the decisions that the organizations must make when evaluating these?
Yeah, great segue here. So I think internal IT has to be there. The one thing that a lot of people think we compete with internal IT, or we might compete with MSP. What I would note is a customer that doesn't have at least one person in internal IT is not a great customer for a company like RapidScale. So we have to have someone that speaks our language, and so I think they're there. They're integral. They know the business. They know what's important to the stakeholders in the business, and are critical to the success of any growing company. And realistically should be focused on those line of business applications and the experts in those to make that company money. The managed service provider, I love the marketing logo there for the truck, because I frequently refer to them as two men in the truck. And that's not meant to be a derogatory statement. It's literally, that's a common business practice nationwide, where you'll have a local MSP that does a fantastic job of that true, like, I'm going to come and shake your hand and take care of your problems in person. And that's really good for what I would call SMB to maybe the small mid-market.
Yeah.
And then as the customer grows, either in size or in region or in employee count, sometimes they outgrow those MSPs. And then you have challenges of, well, do I need to work with 2 or 3 or 4 different MSPs in different regions across the country? So challenges abound when you get to scaling beyond your MSP size. Then you have the hyperscalers, right? And those are where most enterprise apps are going, if not already there. But if you're deploying them yourself, that's a lot of complexity. And if you're not super familiar with that, we used to say people made their careers at IBM, or they made their careers in like managing large storage or mainframes or things like that. Now they're making their careers as AWS architects, and they're very expensive people. They're very hard to find. They're very hard to keep when you do find them. And, without some expertise there, it's a challenge as well. And then you get to the managed cloud service provider, which is, as you might imagine, given who's doing the presentation here, we think is the best of all the options because they're going to be the most flexible. They have experience in the hyperscalers. They have their own cloud platforms, and they have 24/7 staff across all the technology verticals. And so you really get the what I would say is exactly what you need, tailored to your needs. You may not need a SQL DBA, but you need a security engineer. You may not need Windows Server administration, but you really need somebody that's super familiar with, Azure Active Directory, right? So,
Yep.
And it's tough to find a single MSP or a single, engineer to go hire that has skill sets and all of the things you might need from an IT perspective.
Yeah, and sometimes, as we know, that's cost prohibitive, right? To have a network engineer, a DBA, virtualization engineer. I mean, suddenly this adds up, and I think some of the benefits there is obviously we're spreading some of that cost, and that makes it a little more feasible for clients as they jump in. So it's probably a good time in our discussion to talk a little bit more about why RapidScale and introduction of RapidScale and why clients are choosing to work with RapidScale for their cloud services. So a little bit on us. RapidScale was founded in 2008 as a managed cloud service provider that delivers secure and customized cloud solutions that allow users to access their applications from any device, anytime, anywhere. Our team utilizes a very consultative approach in working with clients to develop the proper technology strategy, service implementation, and ongoing support. We provide tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 level support for our clients and end users 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And all of our environments are accessible to clients through a single pane of glass. And I think this is very important because we are big believers that transparency within the IT environment is critical for proper support and management. A couple of years back, RapidScale was acquired by Cox Business in 2018. And what this does for us is, we're a subsidiary of Cox. And sorry about that. And this gives us the benefit of being very flexible and very nimble and client-centric. But we also still have the support of a large-scale organization for sustainability. Any other information on RapidScale and who we are? I mean, you've been with us a long time. You've seen us grow up quite a bit. Anything else you'd like to share on RapidScale for the group?
Yeah, I think all I would add is, we're a little bit, so you've got the large data center providers that sell colo and to managed services. You've got the hyperscalers that are obviously excellent at what they do, but unless you're a global Fortune size company, you're probably not going to buy managed services from them. And even if you do, they're outsourcing it to the global SIs like Cognizant and, Tata, yep. GT and others. Yep. So we really find ourselves in the middle. Plenty of 2-minute truck MSP supporting the SMB, plenty of people focused on the Fortune, size enterprises, but not a lot of people focused in the middle that can scale both directions. So I did see one question in the Q&A. I just want to try to answer it live, and then we can hit the next slide. It's can you please address why go to the cloud? A lot of organizations are under the misapprehension that cloud saves money, and it does not. This question from Gabe. I think what I would note is most of the software providers out there are end-of-lifing their on-prem versions of the software. So even think something as simple as Microsoft Exchange, there likely is not going to be another version of that. You're going to have to go to Exchange Online if you want to use Microsoft email solutions. So and that's not uncommon. Many of the providers we partner with are all in on the cloud and aren't putting a ton of R&D into their on-prem solutions, unless the solutions are focused on service providers like RapidScale, where they're creating multi-tenanted platforms for us to sell and service to our customers. As it pertains to the cost, I would tend to agree. Cloud isn't typically cheaper than doing it yourself. However, most customers that are doing TCO and ROI type scenarios potentially are lumping in OpEx and CapEx into the same dollar, and a dollar is not a dollar. Believe it or not, most CFOs will tell you, there's a major difference in how they account for an OpEx spend versus a CapEx spend, and so it may be cheaper from an OpEx perspective, but because you have an accounting treatment that you prefer CapEx, it's a negative impact to EBITDA. So it really just depends. And so I would note that there's not going to be a lot of options 5 years from now to not do things in the cloud. So
yeah, I would agree. I would agree with those last two statements. And I just like you, I've been doing this a long time, and I think that most clients and end users that I talk to, they're not looking to go to cloud to save money. They're looking to go to the cloud to optimize technology for their business. And sometimes that's around acceleration, sometimes that's around ease of management, sometimes that's mitigating risk. But those are really the reasons that we're hearing that they're going to the cloud. And I think your last point is a great one. Technology is all going to the cloud. So you're going to have to get there. It's just a question of, again, how and with whom. So one of the reasons that clients really like working with RapidScale is our flexibility in managing their IT environment. And this is certainly a big differentiator, I think, for RapidScale. And I've got some information up here on the screen around this approach. Can you share our philosophy around this and why it's important for clients and end users?
Yeah, I think flexibility is the one term I would use to summarize this slide. So many of the folks that are at RapidScale, including myself, have worked at other providers over the years. And we've learned a lot about what customers like and don't like and what they want and what their maybe apprehensions are, right? And so, I've seen managed service providers and cloud providers offer fully managed solutions, which are great, particularly on the smaller end of the businesses that are out there, because they may not have the expertise and they may not care. They just want to know, they kind of want to set it and forget it and let the managed service provider deal with it, which is still a big part of our business. However, if you have, let's say, a couple of network engineers on your team and you want them to be able to go make firewall rule changes in the middle of the day or in their own maintenance window, and you don't want to open a ticket and wait, for change control and all that stuff to occur, that's when co-management comes into play. And many managed service providers, it's either managed or it's not. They don't give the customer access to make changes on their own if it's a managed service. If we believe we want to meet the customer where they want to be met, and if they want us to co-manage it, we'll be happy to do it. It speeds up their own processes. It helps us with call volume and support volume. And at the end of the day, there can't be finger pointing these days because everybody has a unique logon, and it's very easy to see who made the change and what caused the problem. And so I remember many arguments back in the day where a customer would call up and say, just give me access to the firewall. I'm not waiting on your team to make the change, and vice versa. The service provider saying, hey, we don't want to give you access because if you break it, we're on the hook for it, right? And so these days, backups are happening, instantaneously, logs are everywhere. So, it's our belief co-management is really where it's at, especially in the mid-market and into the enterprise. And then unmanaged is an offering. You might ask, why do we even offer that? But we do have a lot of MSPs that are actually partners of RapidScale, where they leverage our portal and our infrastructure to provide services to their customers, to kind of that CapEx avoidance scenario. So they're not selling a server or two or three or anything on-prem. They're putting it in the cloud where it's secure and backed up and scalable. But wrapping their own kind of white glove service around it. So pretty common solution. But also our enterprise customers that just need infrastructure unmanaged, globally. I don't think really noted, but we do have 4 large domestic POPs, as well as in Europe and Asia. So sometimes a customer may be able to do everything they need here in the US, but they need a Asia or European presence that's compliant and secure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the co-managed piece, because I think we touched on this a little earlier, but can you give a specific example of a client that's working in a co-managed environment? So, how do we really designate roles and responsibilities and who owns what from our side and the client side? And really talking about integrating 2 teams to collaborate and work together. So
yeah, we really try to do that up front, but of course IT evolves. But think if we have the ability to do up front, we write it into a statement of work and we build it into the digital run book in life. So for example, support call comes in, we get the screen pops, takes us right to the customer environment, single pane of glass from a support perspective. And the customer may say, hey, I need to restore a backup. It might be that the person at the customer that normally does that is on vacation. And so we would see in our run book that, hey, customer has full access to do that, but occasionally they need our help, and we jump right in there to handle that. Other scenarios are where, again, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, there's a full IT team at the customer site, and they handle all the moves, adds, and changes themselves. But hey, you know what? There's a big software upgrade coming in from their vendor, and they need help, on a Friday night to make sure that we take snapshots before and after the deployment, and we're there just in case things go haywire, and we can roll back with them on the phone. So there's a lot of scenarios where we're just an extension of the IT environment, and we document, in that run book, who's responsible for what normally. But what I would say is we're not going to nickel and dime the customer or say, hey, you guys normally do that, why are you calling us, right? We're just going to jump in and help. And again, with our larger customers, we meet with them monthly, quarterly, however often they want, and review those changes and those events to make sure that we're still aligned from a co-management perspective.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great example. So here's one of my favorite slides. So here's a great snapshot illustrating really how RapidScale helps users access their applications securely from anywhere, anytime, on any device. And I know folks understand, broadly cloud computing, but Dwayne, can you walk us through, how we do this and really what this slide's trying to tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I call this the crayon slide, right? So this is why I'm not in marketing, because I could never come up with this on my own. But the concept here is, we started as an application hosting provider using technologies like Citrix and eventually VMware Horizon and soon to be Windows Virtual Desktops. But our real value is being able to sit down with the customer and talk about where are their employees, what apps are they using, what devices do they have, and help them get them access to those devices securely, but easily as well. So sometimes security, actually makes the end user experience not very good. And so we've spent a ton of time on our identity and access management services to make sure that we give customers, basic checkbox ability. Okay, I'm hiring a new employee, I'm creating an account, I'm giving them a E3 license, I'm giving them a virtual desktop, and I'm adding them to these 4 groups to give them access to these other applications. And while that sounds simple, that can be reality if planned and deployed correctly. So And then we wrap security at every layer, right? So think about at the physical device, we make sure they're encrypted all the way up to the application layer using, single sign-on and identity management and access solutions. And then also many people probably don't know or don't think of RapidScale as an SD-WAN provider, but we're one of the top 4 providers nationally for VeloCloud. And again, if you really think about what our value is, it's being able to give that remote secure access to the applications. Well, we do a lot of that through SD-WAN technologies and secure access service edge deployments. So, and then we try to get the data as close to the end user as possible. So we do have 4, very geographically dispersed data centers. We're also, owned by Cox Communications. So we peer with them at 100 gig nationwide. So anybody that happens to be in a Cox market, I know we're not in one here, but nationwide, you may have offices or branches that are in their territory. So there's some value there as well. We have the portal, which I've put a ton of blood, sweat, and tears into with my development team. But the concept there is, again, you think about traditional IT, you have 10, 15, 20 different vendors that you're using to do, backups and replication and security and access management, on and on and on. And we've just written a portal that talks to all those vendors' APIs so that it really simplifies the day-to-day of IT.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you for walking us through that. So we thought, as we start to bring this to an end, that it may be relevant and helpful to share a use case of an organization here in North Carolina that was navigating the challenges that we've been discussing. The organization is a wholesale distributor of HVAC and refrigeration parts. They've got 90 employees, 9 locations, don't really have a dedicated internal IT team, and had made the decision to utilize cloud computing for the betterment of their business. Unfortunately, their initial cloud experience was not great. And then we got involved. So Dwayne, can you share some of the challenges that this client was facing as they first started talking to us?
Yeah, so I think, again, I would, this sort of a 2-minute a truck problem, right? They outgrew their provider and the skill sets their provider had. I'm sure it was great early on. But, as their environment grew and they got more sophisticated and they, went from 1 location to 9 over time, that local provider wasn't didn't scale with them. It's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah.
I would also note that a lot of companies tried virtual desktops or tried Citrix and failed for many reasons. Could be, poor design, could be poor infrastructure, could be lack of, expertise. But in this case, the customer was already on a Citrix platform with an MSP, liked the technology, but was concerned that it wasn't, being actually managed. So back to the theme of our event, right? It was kind of, they deployed it and then they did the firefighting when stuff broke, but weren't doing the kind of preventative maintenance to ensure, an optimal environment. Again, virtual desktop environments aren't a set it and forget it. There's a lot of care and feeding that goes into making them work. And so again, this particular customer we met with, and before they actually signed with us, they had a pretty major issue and just picked up the phone and said, "Hey, I know we're not paying you yet, but could you help us with this problem?" And again, we're local, so we're sure we'll send an engineer over and take a look. And within an hour, had their problem solved with their existing provider. So not something that happens every day, but it is one of those things where we can get involved early, we can demonstrate our value and almost a try before you buy kind of situation. And we'd love to do that locally and be more locally connected to the Triangle area.
Yeah. Well, and this is how they decided to move forward with RapidScale and where do we help, and really where they landed in terms of their infrastructure in partnership with our team. So why do you think ultimately this client chose us, and where did we really add the most value?
Yeah, I think part of it was we had the complete story. I know the previous slide said they didn't have anyone dedicated to IT, but they did have 3 or 4 folks that were pretty good at IT. It just wasn't their main job.
Yeah.
And so going back to that partnership, we met with them all, kind of documented their wish list, and we came back with a real comprehensive, not just sales proposal, but like plan, like here's how we're going to address those problems and, hopefully prevent them from happening again. But when they do, here's your escalation path. Here's who to call when there's a problem, and really get to know the people supporting your account, versus, 1-800 whatever, and you get a different person every time and you don't really know, where they're at or how they're helping you. And it's just a little bit more personal approach. So we developed a plan to modernize the virtual desktop infrastructure. We developed a plan to actually enhance their experience by deploying SD-WAN, which they didn't have. And the provider they were with didn't offer it. We enhanced their email security. So they were having multiple, phishing attempts, and again, that's not if, it's when you accidentally click on one, it becomes the problem. And so, we got that deployed pretty quickly. And then we fortified their kind of backups as well. So they weren't real sure about their backups. They knew they were paying for it. And again, we say, hey, you can pay for it, but unless you test it, you're not going to sleep good at night. So we highly recommended, a test, even if it's only monthly or quarterly, to go in there and offer that as well. And then we replicated their backups to another data center of ours. So if, it was part of their disaster recovery plan that they did not have today, and we were able to get them a complete solution for not much different than they were paying at their other provider, which is normally, I don't walk into meetings saying we're going to save you money and do it cheaper, faster, better. But in this case, we actually were able to do it faster and better for about the same amount of money. So it was not, they didn't have to pay a lot more to get better service. They just didn't know that better service existed.
Yeah. Well, and that's certainly part of why we're having this conversation today.
Yep.
So that concludes, our presentation, our discussion on managed cloud services that are actually managed. We did have, one question come through as we were talking. We'd certainly like to open it up some more for some more Q&A. Are there any other questions out there that anybody can send through the chat? I'm going to give us a minute here.
I would note, while we're waiting, we are right downtown Raleigh. We're on our third office downtown as we continue to grow. And I actually am met with our real estate team yesterday to expand again. So we're today on Glenwood South. So I know Brian's looking to do a customer event and later this year. Hopefully we can do it in person, and love for anybody interested to come by and visit.
Yeah, that's really well said, Dwayne. Okay, I think that you did such a great job in taking us through this presentation that we don't have any questions, which is okay. There may be some after the fact. So I'd like to thank NC Tech for the opportunity to share the RapidScale perspective. A big thank you to our General Manager and Vice President, Dwayne Barnes, for taking some time today and giving us his point of view. Lastly, I'd like to thank everybody that was on the webinar this morning for taking some time out of your day to join us for this discussion and learn a little bit more about managed cloud services that are actually managed. If you'd like to learn more about RapidScale, or if you've just got questions around what we discussed today, my information's here on the screen. Certainly our website information's on the screen. And I know that Emily is going to send out a post-event email that's going to include this presentation that we recorded here today. And certainly if you've got some follow-up questions, we will jump in and answer those. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this back over to Emily.
Yeah, I just see one quick question in the chat, Brian, if you wanted to.
Oh, I missed it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. And it just says, what is your relationship with the hyperscalers effectively? And so what I would note is we're highly focused on the Microsoft ecosystem. It's just, again, where we've spent a ton of our time and energy over the years. So we do a lot of work with Azure related to the entire 365 stack, the Azure Active Directory, identity management, endpoint protection, so things like Intune, and the migration strategies all throughout. So we don't do a ton with AWS and GCP, other than we can be the on-ramp to those providers. We can offer connectivity options through SD-WAN, through our parent company with Cox being directly connected to them, as well as just consulting around where the workloads best fit from that perspective. So great question.
Yep. All right. Any last call? Any more questions, Emily? I think we're good. Thank you for catching that one.
Absolutely, and thank you both, Brian and Dwayne, for sponsoring and presenting today's workshop. And as Brian mentioned, I'll send over a recording. You can share that with your networks, anyone who wasn't maybe able to join us today. And I will include contact information for both Brian and Dwayne again. So if you think of anything as you go throughout your day, this program, our virtual workshops, are an option for all of our members to present on a topic of their choosing. So we appreciate RapidScale's hosting and sponsoring this today. Keep an eye out at nctech.org/events for all of our upcoming events. We're getting real excited for the Golf Classic at Pinehurst. We were chatting earlier on our call about that, and our Leadership Summit, which will feature in-person and virtual attendee options. So let us know if you have any questions, and thank you so much for joining. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.